A very warm welcome to View from the Commentary Box, and a very excited box at BT Murrayfield as well. We've just witnessed an extraordinary match between Scotland and New Zealand, sadly with the same result. It ended with a New Zealand win by 31 points to 23, but certainly with 15 minutes to go, it looked as if, Scotland could actually get that elusive win that they haven't had for many, many years. Well, joining me today, Stuart McFarlane, who called it on Talksport. He was the commentator for the match. Grahame, MacGregor, BBC Radio Scotland, and also Purdie is here from Borders Rugby Television and Radio. We'll start with you, Stuart, first of all. It's a bit of an anticlimax at the end, seeing New Zealand get over the line once again, but certainly the boys played with an awful lot of heart.
Oh, absolutely. A case of what might have been, I suppose, the spectators, a capacity crowd at BT Murrayfield heading away, having watched a thrilling contest, a very competitive game. And after 8 minutes, when New Zealand were 14-0 in front, you were suddenly thinking, could this be Scotland staring into the headlights like a frightened rabbit? How are they going to respond, being 14-0 down so early on? Well, they hit back straight away. New Zealand, a yellow card, losing the services of their outside centre. It was who was yellow carded for 10 minutes, and Scotland within those 10 minutes were back on level terms, and great credit to the team for doing that. I think the main talking point, and I'm sure it will be the subject of 1,000 pub conversations, is the points that were left out in the park. And I think today, as a full game, is a perfect illustration of the fine margins and the little moments that can change a game in the fortunes of one side or the other, because there was 2 yellow cards and they were damaging for both sides that lost the man. For New Zealand in the first half, when Dempsey was yellow carded towards the end of the second half, that was a very damaging period when New Zealand were working their way through the gears at a quicker rate of knots, and their bench made a considerable impact. There's no question about that. But great pride, tremendous international game, a lot of quality, but again, it's just trying to get to that next level by cutting out the errors and ensuring that you take your chances. Yeah. Every chance.
Well, turning to you, Robin, I mean, 14-0 up after 7 minutes, and that was rather ominous, but it was 52 minutes before New Zealand scored again, and in that time Scotland got ahead to lead during the interval, 17 points to 14 in unknown territory. And we thought, well, this is a very unusual Scotland performance. We're used to them conceding before half-time. We're used to seeing them capitulate when they're 14-0 down. But no, we had none of that. We had a different Scotland who were on the park, who were taking the game to New Zealand.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Capitulation was the word that potentially could have been used when you were sat here after 6 or 7 minutes. We've seen it so often, early tries and then the heads go down and that's the end of that. But all credit to Scotland on the back of that. They raced back into contention, and of course they took a lead, and as Stuart said, they left a couple out there in that first half. And yeah, I was very, very impressed by Scotland today for lots of the game. Stuart's absolutely right. New Zealand's bench made more of an impact than ours did. But yeah, I think a lot of positives can be taken. Across the weeks as a whole, we lost the game we should have won, an under strength, Scotland against Australia, first weekend. We weren't great last week, but yesterday's result in Ireland maybe puts a bit more of a shine on Scotland's result against Fiji. And I thought for large swathes today we were really, really, really good. And yeah, I think we're looking forward to Argentina now with quite a bit of confidence, to be honest.
Absolutely. Grahame, MacGregor is here as well. Penalty try. Could have been another one for Stuart Hogg's record book, but it wasn't. He was judged to have been shoved away. Was that your sort of interpretation of it as well? I said immediately penalty try, and that was confirmed by the referee. I think upstairs at the TMOs they were a bit indecisive, but the referee was certainly saying, no, this is a penalty try for me.
Yeah, in a sense that's one of the fine margins that you might say. In fact, it could have been either way. Thankfully it went the way it did. Last week we spent quite a bit of time talking about the missing Stardust, and of course we're talking about about Finn Russell there, and he was there. We didn't think he'd even be starting at one point. We knew he was going to be in the squad, and I think he contributed in a big way to that win today. His distribution, there was nothing too flashy, but he isn't flashy anymore. He's a mature enough player not to be like that, but the contribution he has in games in terms of just getting the back line going, and his defence as well. He doesn't worry about getting in there and getting in amongst the defence and scrambling up quick and back into the line again after that, and that made a big difference. But it was at the beginning, it was horrific, and I was reminded of the game against Italy quite a number of years ago. Chris Cussiter was playing when Italy, of all countries, went 21-0 up against Scotland in the first few minutes.
Cussiter will remember that.
He will remember that. And I thought, 14-0 now, at that point, and it's the All Blacks, what's this going to be like? But well, we steadied the ship, and it was helped by yellow card, I know, and so on. And the game was phased, like the guys are saying, there in different ways. And of course, we just kept in there doing the right thing, kicking for goal. No daft things as we had last week about let's try at the corner, guys. It is the All Blacks after all. Let's not be silly here. And Finn, of course, as we know, is an ace kicker at the present moment. He's in tremendous form. And when we got that margin, it was just too good to believe in many ways, and that is the way it turned out to be. And of course, we then got into that final one where the yellow card went to us, and it's unfortunate that we've seen it so many times before, but referees will always give a yellow card and a penalty when a player that near to the line tries. He didn't intentionally want to knock it on. I'm sure he tried to get there, but when you do it with one hand, that is it. And that made a difference, allied to the fact that undoubtedly, unlike Scotland, we probably had a weaker bench. But New Zealand had such a strong, and they made such a difference when these guys came on, and allied together against the 14 men of Scotland. That is how New Zealand then managed to get it together, and you just felt, here we go, we just knew this was going to happen. It's such a Scottish finish, and off they went, and hey presto, we've got to wait yet another 3 or 4 years to have a bash.
Well, I spoke to Gregor Townsend earlier on. I haven't seen him so sort of disappointed, I think, ever. He really was very disappointed, and we did an interview, obviously, for Talksport, which you can hear. However, we do have the conference, which we've just come out of, and let's give you a listen. This is raw and unedited. Gregor Townsend and his press conference.
Gregor, Jamie was saying there, a mixture of disappointment, but also pride in the performance. Does that chime with how you're feeling right now?
Yeah, mainly disappointment. Disappointment that we don't get to play New Zealand every couple of years like we used to. It's been 5 years. That'll be the biggest lead we've ever had against New Zealand in our history, and we didn't get the win.
What do you think was the main reason you couldn't go over the line? You obviously got yourselves in a fantastic position.
You mean over the try line or to get the win?
To get the win.
Yeah, well, a couple of times we were getting over the try line. The one in the first half was really good play by them. I think Sevilla's Jackal just timed that well, but we could have shifted that ball a little bit wider. The one in the second half was a bit bad luck that we made a really good break, and just the way the offload went to Ali, the defence got the advantage. Obviously there was Darcy's one, which is millimetres away from a try as well. So those are the occasions you increase your lead. But we scored 23 points to 0 during a 50-minute period, so those margins you have to kick on and win. You have to see out the win, and we didn't do that today.
You must be heartened though that the way you came back from 14-0 down, a lot of teams in that position against the All Blacks, there is no way back. You must have been pleased. Yeah,
that was great. I think the calmness the players showed, and also sticking to what they'd worked during the week, and playing with energy, showing their skill individually. Those set piece wise, lineup was outstanding. Scrum, there was obviously a crucial call later on in the game, but I felt set piece and what we're doing attack and defence after that period was excellent. But we're 9 points up, and we control a fair bit of the destiny in that last 15-20 minutes. All of the New Zealand are going to come back into it. They're a very good team, but it's a couple of errors from us that allowed them to get better field position, allowed them to get penalties.
The same question I asked Jamie, Gregor. Did you sense a turning point at all in the last 20? Because I don't think New Zealand gave away a penalty in the last 20. From memory.
No, there was there's a couple of errors when I think they kicked a goal. I can't remember whether the line-up maul that got held up was before or after that. We did have a scrum penalty. We didn't feel the high ball. So I didn't feel they were doing anything different than they'd done for 40 minutes, and we were containing them. Felt our management of when to play and when to kick was excellent. Our chase was outstanding, but we let them back in with a couple of errors. When they carried in our half, they were strong. I thought their body heights were very good, and we weren't able to get the jackals that they got against us. And the yellow card does put you under pressure. It lifts opposition, and that's where they cause damage.
You've won some big ones, you've lost some big ones. Where does this is this the sorest one you've ever had to take?
Well, probably Japan in the World Cup would be up there, but this
is a performance. This was Japan really well.
Was it not?
Not really, no.
Okay, it's your opinion. Look, this is disappointing because you don't get to play New Zealand, and we've never beaten them in our history. So when you play like that and get a lead, then you obviously feel you should win the game, and we didn't.
What did you make of the yellow card, Gregor?
The yellow card referee called it.
Do you agree with it this week?
I don't have an opinion on it.
Were you surprised at the sort of sea change in penalties? I mean, you were winning a lot of penalties for almost an hour, and then it suddenly utterly changed in the last 20 minutes.
Yeah, no, and that's when you've got one man advantage and you're playing in an opposition half. I think a lot of the penalties were around the ruck area, and you can analyse them and say, was it really good play by them, was it poor play by us, or were their bodies in the way? The referee obviously allowed that contest, and they got more penalties out of it than we did.
Quite close to Purdie. What was it like having him here?
Yeah, it was obviously a big occasion for Purdie, for his family, and it was brilliant to hear the crowd show their appreciation. But we wanted to win the game for Purdie, and we didn't.
Feeling in the dressing room amongst the lads, is it describable how they're feeling?
Yeah, they're okay. They've just got in literally the last minute. A lot of autographs to sign and family to speak to. We know we've got a game next week in 6 days, so they'll quickly move on to that.
What did you make of Finn's performance?
Thought he was very good. Thought he defended well. His decision making around when to play, where to play was very good, and his goal kicking was excellent.
It's Fraser Brown's first start a long time. How did
I did really well. I thought the line-out was a massive plus for us. I think Richie Gray has been a revelation the last 2 or 3 weeks, and Fraser had to go longer than we were probably expecting, given that we picked up a back row injury early on, and we know Fraser could have covered there, so he put in huge effort for having not played at this level for a while.
And that was the end of the press conference, raw and unedited, and that was obviously Gregor Townsend. Very disappointed. Your own thoughts on that, Stuart?
Yeah, I mean, it's looking back, it's the questions that were asked. It's a fair assessment of the game. He touched on Darcy Grahame being very unfortunate to have had part of his left foot in touch when he was over for what would have been his second try of the game, his 14th international try. There was the opportunity for Fraser underneath the posts and the Scotland forwards at the very end of the first half, and you sort of touched on with the question to Robin about Scotland not conceding at half time. I suppose today they didn't get that extra score before half time when it was all not on a plate for them by any stretch, because it was excellent New Zealand defence, but it was still a marvellous opportunity to get another score, to get another 5, more than likely 7 points, given the position they were in that 22. And again, Stuart Hogg had a very good break in the second half down that left-hand side. So these are the moments in the games where I suppose Gregor will be playing them back in his mind, along with the decision with Dempsey going in for a tackle. His eyes were almost closed as he was going in to make the tackle, and the ball is then deflected off the hand. But it is a knock on. The yellow card is shown, and that added to the pressure that New Zealand were beginning to mount at that stage, because their phases were greater in number, they were quicker in intensity. The bench by then had been practically emptied. You had a very busy time in the second half following all the changes, and all of that is still playing around in the head of Gregor Townsend, trying to make sense of it. And clearly the other issue that he has is that, when's it going to come along again? Is that going to be the final time he's Scotland coach, taking on a New Zealand team? And let's be perfectly honest here, not a great New Zealand side. Taking nothing away from the Scotland performance, was that a World Cup winning performance from New Zealand out there? It's more akin to the New Zealand side that were here in 1983, that were very different to the squad that played the Lions in 83 and were beginning to shape up for a run at the 87 World Cup. And they weren't necessarily at their best, as Grahame of all of us will remember more clearly than maybe we do in 83. Out there today, in that period in the second half, the first 10, 15, 20 minutes of the second half, Sam Whitelock, for all his experience and 140 plus caps, didn't cut a comfortable figure out there in the park.
And you mentioned about the 15 that started. It was always interesting to see when New Zealand were going to start reaching for the bench, and it was about 55 minutes into the game, and when the replacements came, they came thick and fast, and they changed the game.
They did. They changed the intensity, the direction of play, and also penalty count tightened up quite considerably. I think that the change at halfbacks, that halfback dynamic changed. There was quicker ball, and the series of phases, the ball carriers were breaking the lines of tackling. And I think, Scotland's positioning in defence was then altered because New Zealand were making some subtle changes. And, having somebody like Joe Schmidt in your ranks, I mean, he knows all the finite details about the Scotland performance, as well as probably the Scotland psyche, and knows that, the Scottish supporters at a stage where Scotland had, I think, a 9-point lead, they're still walking a tightrope, getting closer and closer and closer to the rainbow and the promised land. But as they're getting closer, that tightrope is getting higher and higher. So the loss is then somewhat greater. And he'll have drilled that into the New Zealand players, and it's part of the New Zealand psyche that this will not go down as a classic New Zealand win, but it's another win. It's at the 23rd for their head coach. They're one win away from a 69% win record, I think, in 2022, and what has been at times a horrific year by their standards.
Yeah. Now, Grahame, obviously, Gregor mentioned there was a period of 50 minutes where we scored 23 points without conceding anything against New Zealand. Quite a stat.
Yeah, quite, as he said, it was history, really, as far as Scotland's concerned, against New Zealand. I'm just thinking, as Stuart speaks, how do you summarise that? Was it that Scotland just weren't good enough, or that New Zealand were fortunate in many ways? I think that was a great performance by Scotland, and they kept ahead. They did the wise things. They didn't kick to the corner. They kicked to the post and managed to get that margin going. And I think that New Zealand really, it wasn't a great display by them, but what a pedigree they have. And when you have that behind you, all that history and all that knowledge that and the pride that they have, and that kind of thing underpins the fact they're not going to let a match slip away from them if they possibly can. And with the things we talked about already, the coming on with a much more direct play that they had with the bench coming on and so on, and of course, obviously, Scotland being down a man at the most critical time, that really just fed into the situation that New Zealand, the confidence, you felt it coming back to you, the confidence was rising, because they did look a wee bit at 6s and 7s in the first half at times, for them at least, and the fact that they just are good. It wasn't that long ago. We know they've had a tough year, but it wasn't that long ago they were putting paid to every other big side in the world, and here we are, Scotland, thinking we might have been able to beat them today. Well, we might have been, and it nearly was there, but those fine margins come into play. Andy Robinson was a great one for talking about fine margins.
He certainly was.
And if there were fine margins, that was it today, and turning on these little things. So we're not talking about an enormous gulf where we went out as a bunch of amateurs against one of the greatest sides ever. It was much closer than that, and the way that they acted, honestly, I think in the press conference, New Zealand, the skipper and the coach reflected that they meant it when they said that they knew it was tough coming here, and it always is, because of the crowd, because of the passion which they would feel today, and there was a lot of that there. You know, what sides must think when they hear that second verse of Flower of Scotland unaccompanied. And I mean, there's a lot of passion there, which it can be difficult for sides coming here to actually play against. But New Zealand, as I say, with that kind of pedigree, with the kind of background they have, that really came to their rescue, and some really astute calling on the bench at the right time and so on by their coach. I mean, they're not. I mean, we know they're not number one in the world, but you know, who would bet against that not being the case in another year or so, that we're back there again? They just are so fantastic. So, in summary, another one, and we've got another weight. That was at 33, I think that was, that we've lost, or we haven't won. We of course drew twice, but we've got another weight to come. But I think we can be reasonably happy with the way we're going. We're certainly an improvement on the first two matches, and we've got to continue it then for the fourth and final one next week. And
we did better than Wales. Wales conceded 55 points against. Okay, it was a slightly different New Zealand team, but it was still, you know, they were on a roll when they were coming to BT Murrayfield here. And going back to that as well, the long wait. When was the first time you saw New Zealand and Scotland play? Was it the 1950s?
Oh, I presume it must be honest. You can't remember. I mean, I do remember, of course, the two draws we've had. We talked about them briefly.
You've been to the two draws.
Yeah, that's it. So bizarrely different in terms of points. The first one, they shared 0 points. It was a 0-0 draw, which is unheard of even in those days. Well, probably more likely in those days, but nowadays certainly wouldn't happen. You don't get 0-0. Even very poor sides will conjure up a try or a penalty or something. And then the next one, which was just preceding Scotland's purple patch, if we can call it that, of the about 83 to 91, 7 or 8 years there, including the World Cup at the end of in 1990. It wasn't
91. 91.
91, that's right.
And
of course the famous Grand Slam match. Yeah. Oops, sorry about that. Grand Slam match against England. In 83. We shared 50 points, 25 each against. I certainly remember that. And again, a match. Well, of course, obviously, both of them could have been won, especially the 25-all one. But and we had, of course, 5 years ago, famously Stuart Hogg going in for what would have been a match, a try to equal the scores, and who knows what will happen with the kick. It just seems to be so tantalising these days when we play New Zealand, but well, one day it will happen.
Yes, well, certainly, I mean, the last 3 games we've got to within 10 points, so there's definite improvement there, which I know isn't much of a consolation. Robin, come to you about a couple of players. Darcy Grahame, I thought, was outstanding today. Scored a try, almost did some acrobatics in the corner to get another one. Rory Sutherland, always a sad sight to see him go off. He's had so many injuries in his career, almost career-ending injuries, but he's come back. He was in a wheelchair 5 years ago. It's extraordinary. And then we'll talk about a particular New Zealand player in a second, but Darcy and Rory.
Darcy and Rory, well, as you say, Rory unfortunately went off. We didn't see too much of him. I don't think he was on all that long. I thought Darcy went really well today. Darcy was named man of the match last week, and I thought Darcy played better today. There's possibly a reason for that. I mean, I think most of the back line played really well today. Duhan van der Merwe was on the rampage, and I thought Stuart Hogg had his best game in quite a while for Scotland, if I'm being honest. And
how much do you put that down to the Finn Russell effect? Because I was going to say that, you know, they all kind of seem to lift a gear with Finn Russell in there kind of pulling the strings.
You've taken the words right out of my mouth. I was literally about to say I think Finn Russell drags others up to his level. He is for me, he is a ridiculously good rugby player. Some of his distribution today was absolutely fantastic, and I think he brings others up around him. And I thought all the Scotland back division today played well. I thought today, backs and forwards, we won a lot more collisions than we won last week, and I think New Zealand are probably more similarly sized to us. Some of the Fiji team last week, we lost collision after collision after collision, but the Fijian back row especially are behemoths, and they get up ahead of steam as well. And we're physically, as game as we might be, we're physically not able to stop them on the gain line. But I thought we did that much better today, and I thought we got over the gain line. I thought Tui Talupu went really well at inside centre as well. He looked bang up for it, and I just think everybody today was just up a level, and that stands us in good stead. Going back to what we're saying about New Zealand and where New Zealand have been, I think that's a really interesting statistic that Stuart mentioned there. That if they win whatever next week or whatever, that'll be 69% in what has been their annus horribilis or whatever you want to call it. But let's not forget this New Zealand team, since the start of the summer, so in the last 4 months, last week they put 55 points on Wales, they put 53 points on Argentina, they put 35 points on South Africa, and they put 42 points on Ireland, albeit they lost the test series, but they took 42 points on that Irish defence. So that was, I think there's maybe a wee bit of a sort of false sense of optimism in some sections of the Scottish fans in the run-up to this game, that this is the best time we're ever going to play them, and if we could, this is still a first-class outfit, and we need to get our strongest 15 on the park at the start just to be in with a squeak of a chance. But they can bring Rico Ione off the bench. One of the world's best players, he can come off the bench, and Perinara came off the bench, and that just gave them all kinds of impotence. And our best players have to start. But I thought some of our top men, Stuart Hogg was tremendous today. He's lost none of his pace that first, the penalty try. And I agree with Grahame that maybe yourself, the TMO did his level best to talk Frank Murphy out of awarding that, I thought. But that was a sensational burst of pace by Hogg, and I just think it was an upgrade on last week. But last week, as I said before, potentially is not, it's not a bad result, and we're not in a bad place, and we're Scotland, and we've got two professional teams, and we don't have any God-given right to be beating on a regular basis any other team in the top 10 teams in the world. We just don't have that right. We've got the lowest playing pool by however much on all these teams, and we are where we are. Are we going to win the World Cup? I don't think so. Are we going to win the Six Nations? It would be great. I'd almost rather win the Six Nations, given where we've been in recent times. But we don't have a God-given right, and there was maybe just a wee bit of over-optimism in the run-up to this. And I think Scotland done fantastically well for large parts of that today.
OK, now the New Zealand player that I was going to mention, obviously, was Finlay Christie, playing scrum half today. Board at the BGH, the Borders General Hospital. This is, of course, Borders Rugby Radio, so we're glad to include him in our little talk here. I thought he played pretty well. He was a nippy little scrum half, gave Ali Price a lot of problems, but just nice to see him, and I spoke to him earlier for Talksport, and he was delighted to play here at BT Murrayfield.
Oh, it'd be a huge occasion for him as well on a personal level. He's 28 now, and I think today was his 14th international as an All Black, and I think I mentioned before that Peebles, it's quite extraordinary for a town of Peebles' size to have had someone go to the Summer Olympics and win a gold medal, to be the birthplace of someone who's gone to the Winter Olympics and to feature in Grenoble in 1968 in the Luge, and now to have been not the birthplace, but he did grow up for a period of time in his young life in Peebles, and of course has gone on to become an All Black. So I mean, it's quite the pedigree that they have, not to mention the success they've had in cycling and other sports, of course. But yes, he was out there today, started at 9, was solid. Was very much in the thick of the action in trying to get phase after phase going when New Zealand, opened up that 14-0 lead and then started to chip away at Scotland's advance that would take Scotland to opening up I think a 9-point advantage that they had at 23-14 at one stage. So it's nice very good, and I'm delighted that you did get the chance to speak to him because of that Borders connection, because that's clearly where his interest in the sport started, where it all began from.
Yeah, and he said he's going to be staying on for a couple of weeks in the Borders as well, see family and friends, because his brother plays for Currie, of course.
Yeah, and that's the interesting thing as well is it's not an isolated case. You've got the family connection within the story, and it's funny that this fixture has brought up some little interesting sort of quirky tales in the past. That we've had All Black captain, albeit for 2 matches against South Africa in 1921, 4 years later be a centre and be part of Scotland's first Grand Slam winning side. So it's not necessarily been a new thing that you can represent two countries just a few years apart, as was the case in football with some of the very finest players representing the likes of Argentina and Spain during the 1950s. So Di Stefano being an example of that. So yeah, I think it's great that he's had the chance during his career to come back here and play, and for him playing a winning side.
Okay, well, we're almost out of time, but there is another match, so we have to park the New Zealand result, I'm afraid. And it is very interesting because the last 10 games now, it's been lost, won, lost, won, lost, won, lost. Are we going to see a loss against Argentina and then we beat England? Is that how it's going to work? What do you reckon, Robin?
No, I think your kind of run there is going to come unstuck next week. I fancy us on today's evidence to beat Argentina this coming Saturday. Much could depend on the penalty count and where those penalties occur, because Argentina have got arguably the world's best kicker on current form in Edinburgh's Buffelli, and he is deadly from kind of a lot of regions on the pitch. So yeah, if we can keep the penalty count, I thought the penalty count was better today, particularly in the first half. We only conceded 5 to New Zealand 7 in the first half, or maybe even 8. But yeah, if we can keep that side of the game on point, I think I've seen enough today to believe that we can beat Argentina next Saturday. Okay, so a win for Scotland next week for you, Grahame.
Well, Argentina have been a side that we've been very close to in terms of winning and losing over the last 10-15 years, more than that maybe, and that nothing has changed at the present moment. I think we will win if we keep that kind of shape we had today in the best moments of this game, the game today, and the magic of Finn Russell with his distribution. Robin mentioned it, I think was key to much of what we did early on. It is just remarkable how he can fire passes out with pinpoint accuracy and get his back line going the way that it wasn't going beforehand. So if it continues like that, we'll certainly give them a run for their money, and it'll be close, you'd imagine.
But still a win for you.
But still a win.
Okay. A final word with Stuart?
Yeah, I think if we're disciplined, if we can match the focus and intensity that we produced for 50 minutes here today against Argentina, and if the discipline, like Xander Fagerson, for example, or WP Nell is on the part, and they're not giving away penalties and players like that in the forwards, if they remain disciplined and focused, I think there is every chance that we can topple them, because obviously there's a few little battles that will be played out on Saturday that will be continuations on from what happened in the summer. And I think it's maybe good for Scotland to take on a side like Argentina at this stage in the year before the Six Nations, and I think in front of this crowd there's every chance that they can do it.
Okay, well, thank you very much to our little panel of experts here. We'll be back next week, so thanks to Stuart McFarlane, Grahame MacGregor, and to Robin Purdie as well. So it wasn't to be today, but maybe next week we'll get that elusive victory against Argentina. From me, Stuart Cameron, bye-bye for now.